Visual effects are used all the time, but sometimes it's so well done you don't even notice it. So here's your spoiler warning as we take a look at some CGI movie moments so convincing you thought they were real. Changing faces. One of the least noticeable CGI tricks these days is face replacement, basically sticking one person's face onto another's. A standout example comes from the 2013 action flick Iron Man 3. We all know that this metal maverick is one of Marvel's greatest superheroes, largely thanks to Robert Downey Jr.'s spot-on performance as Tony Stark. But during filming, Downey injured his ankle in a stunt and had to sit out for 6 weeks of filming. Rather than put production on hold, the filmmakers brought in a body double and teamed up with visual effects powerhouse Weta Digital to pull off this marvel. They created a 3D Downey mask using face capture footage of the actor, which they then placed over the double's face. You know that whole beach scene in the movie's last few minutes? That was all shot with the double wearing a CGI mask, and honestly, I can't even tell. To this day, most have no idea which scenes are real and which feature the double. In the same year, action flick Furious 7 was in production, but it faced a tragic setback as cast member Paul Walker sadly passed away. Director James Wan decided to press on, but the question arose: how would Walker's character Brian O'Connor continue when he could no longer appear in future films? At the time of his death, Walker had completed the majority of his scenes, so the filmmakers decided to rewrite the ending to give both the character and Walker a proper send-off. Thanks to Weta Digital, Walker could be recreated for his remaining scenes. The process was meticulous. 90 shots were crafted using archival footage of Walker, which were edited and relit. Take that heartbreaking ending where Vin Diesel and Walker share one last drive. That image of Brian staring out the car window was created using shots from Fast 5, but repurposed with CGI lighting to make it look like it was filmed on a hot sunny day. And that's not all. For 260 more shots, Walker's brothers Caleb and Cody and a third actor, John Brotherton, came in as stand-ins. The brothers were scanned to provide the closest reference to Walker, which was then combined with old footage to create a CGI copy of Walker's head, which was added to the real-life stand-ins for the remaining scenes. Furious 7 was released in 2015, becoming a massive hit and seriously impressing people with the effects, for the most part. The technology would be used yet again in another superhero movie starring a crusader with some awesome slicing blades. Chainsaw Man? No, it's Wolverine, or as you know him, Logan. This 2017 movie opens in a world where Wolverine's super healing powers are failing, leaving him scarred and worn down by age. To achieve this look, visual effects house Image Engine joined forces with the University of Southern California's Institute for Creative Technologies. They captured Hugh Jackman's face and body in ultra-realistic detail by individually shining 346 different lights on him to map the texture of his skin and hair. What a bright idea! This digital version of Jackman was used for bone-shattering stunts like when Wolverine escapes from the baddies in a stretch limo. Here, a stunt double had a digital version of Jackman's head effortlessly placed on top of him. Towards the movie's third act, Logan comes face-to-face with his deadly doppelganger X-24. You might think Hugh Jackman played both roles with the filmmakers splicing his performances together with a split screen. Well, you're wrong. X-24 was in fact a partly digital creation. He was a blend of Jackman's face edited to appear younger and then mapped onto a stunt double's body, creating a stronger, meaner version of Wolverine. Pretty amazing. Two heads are better than one, and that's certainly true with the biopic The Social Network. The story follows Mark Zuckerberg's rise and his legal battles against the Winklevoss twins, both played by Armie Hammer, with the help of some nifty tech. The face replacement was handled by Lola Visual Effects, who mapped out Hammer's face to create a 3D computerized version. During filming, actor Josh Pence acted as a body double, with his face tracked and later swapped out with Hammer's in post. Although only 20 shots used this technique, the majority of the shots layered Hammer's separate performance with a split screen where the same actor is filmed twice on opposite sides of the camera. These two shots are composited together to make it appear as if two identical people are interacting, though they do slip up sometimes. You can spot a bit where they didn't face swap hints right here. In that same year, the psychological horror Black Swan was released, starring Natalie Portman as Nina, a ballerina battling for the lead role in Swan Lake, whilst also battling her inner demons. The film showcased some great subtle uses of CGI by look effects. For instance, when filming a sequence in front of a mirror, the fact that the crew could be digitally erased meant that director Darren Aronofsky could shoot from any angle he wanted. Then in the finale, Nina goes through a final metamorphosis, becoming a literal black swan. This transformation is foreshadowed throughout the movie with moments of uncanny body horror. Take this shot of her hands. Notice how they seem a bit stretched, kind of like wings? This blink and you'll miss it effect gives the whole film a creepy vibe, perfect for horror. For the role, Portman famously trained for a year in ballet, though a dance double, Sarah Lane, was still used for complex sequences, especially those in long shot. After this, Lane's face was digitally replaced with Portman's to stunning effect. In fact, the CGI was so good that it stirred up some juicy tea. Lane's work went uncredited, and a clip of the face swap process was reportedly removed from YouTube right before the Oscars. Lane even claimed that she'd been asked by a producer to stop discussing her involvement until awards seasons was over, as Aronofsky was pushing the narrative that Portman did most of her own dancing with minimal help from a double. This led to accusations that the film's promoters were downplaying Lane's role to hype up Portman's ballet skills and bag that sweet, sweet Oscar. Lane asserted that Portman only did 5% of the dancing, while Aronofsky said it was more like 80 to 90%. The CGI was so brilliant, however, that it's tough to know which dancer is which. So in the end, we may never know just how much credit each performer deserves. Now, if you want to get what you deserve, in a good way, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. That way you'll be first in line for all our videos on CGI, like the incredible evolution of special effects. All set? Then let's keep rolling. This face stuff is all great, but when did it begin? For that, we gotta go back to the 90s. Steven Spielberg was working on one of the biggest movies in prehistory, Jurassic Park. His dinos are pretty darn impressive. But remember, the best effects are the ones you don't notice. Take the scene where the main characters are scrambling through vents to get away from the velociraptors. Lex falls down a ceiling panel but manages to hold on for dear life and narrowly escapes the hungry raptors. In reality, a stunt double performed this scene, but when filming, she looked up at the camera for a split second. The audience would see this clearly wasn't Lex if it weren't for the visual effects company Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM. The company cleverly saved the shot by reshooting the scene with Lex's actual actor, Ariana Richards, dangling from the panel. Richards' face was then pasted over the stuntwoman's, earning Jurassic Park the Guinness World Record for first digital face replacement. Now that I think about it, it did seem impressive for a young teenager to have biceps like a Giga Chad. Hindering hindsight. Of course, I can't talk about Spielberg movies without talking about E.T. the Extraterrestrial. This 1982 story about a boy and his weird little alien has warmed the hearts of millions, becoming a beloved family picture. But that wasn't enough for Spielberg. In its original release, the government agents hunting down the freaky alien wielded guns. However, in E.T.'s 2002 re-release, these guns were digitally swapped out for walkie-talkies. The change was so inconspicuous that some viewers were probably oblivious to the fact the agents even had firearms in the first place. Spielberg's decision was likely a response to the trauma of 9/11, with audiences in the early 2000s still sensitive to violent imagery. However, Spielberg later regretted the edit, saying that the original was a product of 80s culture. In 2012, he reversed his decision for the film's Blu-ray release, giving the agents their guns back. Hooray! If there's one filmmaker who could learn from Spielberg's hindsight, it's George Lucas. His repeated Star Wars reissues have ruined everything from Jabba the Hutt to making Luke scream like a Muppet. But there's a few CGI enhancements that you might have missed first time around. All Star Wars fans remember the scene from 1983's Return of the Jedi where Darth Vader is dying in Luke's arms and finally removes his helmet. For those who grew up with the original, you'll notice that Vader was missing some key features: his eyebrows. Yep, for the 2011 reissue, Lucas decided to digitally rub out Sebastian Shaw's distinctive bushy caterpillars. To be fair though, this is probably due to the human barbecue he was retroactively put through in Episode 3. Another addition, so pointless you probably missed it, was from 1977's A New Hope, where R2-D2 is hiding in a cave from Tusken Raiders. Lucas decided he wasn't hidden enough, so he added some nice rocks. Solid work, George. That's enough moaning about the original Star Wars movies though. Now, let's moan about the prequels. By the time he began directing the new movies, Lucas was eager to flex his CGI muscles, yet he was so trigger-happy that he put CGI in places where a practical effect would have been simpler and more convincing. Take that pear scene in 2002's Attack of the Clones, where Anakin uses the Force to float a pear to Padme. That's the fakest piece of fruit I've ever seen. Where's the crunch on it? It's like she's biting into green butter. Would it have been that much effort to hang that fruit from a wire? It seems what Lucas thought was a great CGI pear just ended up being an awkward pear. Enough about pears though. What's up next on this VFX Roadshow? Body talk. Now I want to get back to good CGI. Visual effects aren't just brilliant at replicating faces. They've become incredible at tweaking, transmogrifying, and creating the rest of the body too. Do you know which movie pushed boundaries in the removal of body parts? I'll give you a clue. Run, Forrest, run! Yep, it's the 1994 classic and one of my all-time favorites, Forrest Gump. ILM brought this movie to life with a range of incredible effects, from resurrecting long-gone presidents to placing Forrest in iconic scenes of history. But one of ILM's most impressive tricks was making Lieutenant Dan's legs disappear. To pull this off, actor Gary Sinise wore bright blue tights, which helped the visual effects teams isolate his legs before they carefully painted them out of every frame. This marked the first time a Hollywood film managed to realistically remove a character's moving body part across multiple scenes. The effect was also supported by practical elements like a specially designed wheelchair with a slanted seat so Sinise's legs could fold away out of sight. And you know the scene where Lieutenant Dan leaps off the shrimp boat? The crew actually cut a hole in the side of the boat for Sinise to swing his legs through and then digitally added it back later. I guess ILM are a company that's one step ahead. But if we're talking about things I can't stand, then look no further than the DC universe. Before we were terrorized by Henry Cavill's CGI lip in Justice League, purely done to remove his mustache, we had Brandon Routh in the 2006 movie Superman Returns. Though Routh was terrorizing people with an altogether different anatomy. The lead was reportedly so well endowed that the producers worried the bulge in his red underpants might be too distracting. So they called in the VFX team to give him some downsizing. Imagine being that artist when someone at home asks how work went. From one scary image to another, we have Tim Burton. This darkly comic director worked with close friend Johnny Depp in the 2012 horror comedy Dark Shadows. While not a great movie, it does have some pretty spectacular CGI. Depp plays a vampire and, as such, neither blinks nor casts reflections. So to bring this supernatural creature to life, or death, VFX artists painstakingly removed Depp's blinks from over 700 shots. But Depp isn't the only celebrity to have had his eyes adjusted by computer effects. Let's not forget Thor, the hammer-wielding lunkhead. In his 2017 movie Ragnarok, the superhero loses his eye to the villainous Hela. Eek! Afterwards, Thor wears an eye patch, and if you can believe it, that eye patch was CGI. Yep, at first Chris Hemsworth wore a real eye patch, but it kept falling off. Frustrated with the costume, Hemsworth and the filmmakers decided they'd just add the patch in post-production. Instead, the actor wore a few small, unobtrusive dots around his eye, and what might be the most unnecessary use of CGI in a Marvel film. You know what else is unnecessary? Refusing to sit out of a subpar movie after breaking your bones. I'm talking about the 2018 romantic comedy Tag, about a bunch of friends who play an extreme game of, you guessed it, tag. Only 3 days into filming, Jeremy Renner tried a stunt where he leapt from a 20-foot stack of falling chairs. Unfortunately for him, in one take he fell off the stack and broke both his arms. Ouch. He was sent to the hospital, his arms bound in casts, and told that recovery would take 4 to 6 weeks. However, deciding he was too badass to rest, Renner went straight back to work where he carried on filming. In the end, in the scene where he jumps off the chair stack, he was given CGI arms. Not that you'd ever be able to tell. You can spot his cast in this trailer though, right about now. If you watch Tag, you'll notice he's often in a leather jacket, probably to hide the injuries. Renner's co-star Isla Fisher even said he'd peel his cast off and carry on acting with floppy spaghetti arms. Well, that's disgusting. Speaking of disgusting, ever since the 2010s, Disney has been vomiting up more and more of its live-action remakes. Let's dive into 2023's The Little Mermaid with Halle Bailey as Ariel. Now, did you know that the underwater environment and talking sea creatures are all CGI? Yeah, that's obvious. Okay, well, did you know that during the underwater scenes, Bailey's hair was entirely CGI? Yeah, hair doesn't float like that on land. Right, fine. But did you also know that the only part of her body not CGI'd is her face and hands? What? Yep, to create Ariel's floaty movement, Disney designed a special rig that lifted Bailey by the hips, allowing her to spin, flip, and tumble as though she were underwater. Working with a small crew who pushed the rig along, Bailey would lead each move with her head so it looked like she was swimming through the water. Later, animators tracked her body and replaced it with a CGI mermaid. That same year, Netflix released You People, a rom-com starring Lauren London and Jonah Hill. And we all know how funny Hill is, right? Anyway, You People follows the tribulations of a Jewish man and a black woman navigating their cross-cultural relationship. Eventually, the couple decides to get married and have the obligatory kiss at the end. However, some eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed something a bit off about the smooch. According to Andrew Schultz, a cast member present on set, the pair never actually kissed. Instead, the smooch was all CGI. London and Hill just leaned in really close to each other, and the VFX artist took it from there. Although convincing if you're not specifically looking for it, you can definitely see their lips don't touch as much as blur. It looks like they even tried placing falling petals in front of their mouths to hide the sin. It's not exactly known why this kiss was CGI'd. It could have been down to COVID restrictions at the time of filming, or maybe London was just repulsed by Hill. I guess we'll never know. All the small things. There's more to CGI than just fabricating or decapitating body parts. The real magic is in the stuff that often goes unnoticed, like stunning backdrops or the smallest inanimate objects. A truly great effect that's so great its greatness passes you by comes from sci-fi drama Contact, released in 1997. An early scene begins with little Ellie Arroway, played by Jenna Malone, who discovers her dad collapsed on the floor and rushes upstairs to get his medicine. The camera follows her as she desperately runs to the bathroom cabinet, except we're actually looking at her through the mirror. That shot is too good. Director Robert Zemeckis used 3 separate sequences to bring this one shot together. First, they filmed Malone running towards the bathroom. A Steadicam operator with a camera strapped to his chest ran backwards up the stairs and down the hall filming. While doing so, the camera's speed was adjusted from 24 to 48 frames per second, creating slow motion by spreading the additional frames over more time, since slow-mo couldn't be added in post back then. This initial shot was then digitally placed onto the cabinet door to create the illusion of a mirror. In reality, there was no mirror, just a blue screen. The transition is seamless as Malone reaches for the cabinet door, with the reflection actually being the composited footage from the earlier shot. Next, the perspective switches to a behind-the-shoulder view as Malone interacts with the cabinet. Finally, another shot shows the cabinet door closing and the false mirror revealing a photograph in its reflection. When it's all cobbled together, it's just mwah. From a dream to a nightmare, let's turn to The Wolf of Wall Street. This 2013 biopic tells the story of Jordan Belfort, a stockbroker who builds a criminal empire in the wild debauchery that follows. To create Belfort's luxurious lifestyle, VFX artists tweaked the visuals to place an elaborate mansion in the middle of the suburbs. They also added tennis courts to the prison ground where he ends up, because of course, rich people prisons have tennis courts. Now all sorts of crazy shenanigans go on, and if you've seen the film, you know I can't show most of them. What I can show is this shot of a lion casually strolling through an office with none of the workers seeming to notice. That's because in reality the lion wasn't there. Or was it the workers who weren't really there? I'll explain. The team first filmed the lion, which is a real lion by the way, with its trainers in an empty office, then shot a separate scene without the lion, but with a full office of extras. Finally, they digitally removed the trainer and combined the two shots to create a flawless moment that shows off the absurdity of Belfort's world. Talking of absurdity, rev up your engines and push the pedal to the metal. It's Mad Max Fury Road. This 2015 post-apocalyptic thrill ride is notorious for its incredible practical effects and daring stunts, because no soulless CGI could ever match the real thing, right? Actually, the film has over 2,000 visual effects shots, though you'd hardly notice. The majority of the CGI went into removing things like tire tracks and wires. Though for stunts too dangerous for people, actors were filmed in front of a green screen and then digitally placed into the roaring action. Now, production took place in Namibia's deserts, where the skyline can change drastically throughout the day. In the morning, sea fog often rolls in, leaving the area in a white haze, but by the afternoon, it's clear blue skies. Not great if you're filming a scene and the background keeps changing. So to keep things consistent, the crew digitally swapped in skies for better continuity. And let's not forget the Citadel, the kingdom of the villainous warlord Immortan Joe. That's actually a CGI construction based on reference photography of the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. See, real stunts enhanced with digital effects meant that CGI-heavy scenes like the toxic storm sequence look far more realistic. Seems like Fury Road's got some effects that definitely aren't mediocre. You'll go bananas for this next film, War for the Planet of the Apes. This 2017 dystopia follows Caesar, a chimp leader, as he embarks on a quest for vengeance. Now, you already know that the apes are all motion capture, but what's just as impressive is how the VFX artists created those backgrounds. To make this snow-capped forest look ancient and untouched, Weta Digital developed special tree growth software called Totara. This program mimics the way a natural ecosystem develops over time, following real-world logic like competition for resources. It can simulate everything from growing trees to fallen leaves turning brown. It starts with artists scattering digital seeds across the terrain and then letting the virtual forest grow. Each tree grows according to its species and competes for sunlight and water, causing some branches to die off or the undergrowth to spread out naturally. When the artist thinks the forest looks just right, they freeze it in time, setting it as the backdrop for Caesar's journey. Man, I'm going ape for these effects. Cut! That's a wrap, folks! What movie effect blew your mind when you found out it was CGI? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and have an epic day. See you later!